Hello, everybody. It's time for another Celtics Roundtable powered by CLNS Media. It's Analytics Day once again, and today we're talking about defense. Always a hallmark of really good Celtics teams, pretty much, and certainly of the Brad Stevens era. I'm joined, of course, by Sam Sheehan and Matthew Ignal. I'm Jonathan Levy. Let's not waste any time because Lord knows these guys never stop talking once you get them started anyway, right? We got a lot to say. Let's talk about defensive metrics. And guys, looking at it from the Celtics point of view, or even just as guys who crunch numbers, because both of you guys are big into the numbers, what do you see as your favorite or best defensive metrics when you're looking at NBA teams and NBA players? We'll start with you, Sam.
So one of the things that I like, my favorite stat period are what are known as floor stats. And what floor stats are they end up being, it's basically a summation of what happens on the floor. So instead of like looking at individual players, it takes more looks at like 5-man units, the opposing 5-man units, and just sort of rates the total, thing of what is going on the floor. Generally, it's rated by like things like points per possession, which show how many points a certain team will give up per possession. You can expect them to give up. That's their defense, and how much they score, which is their offense. The reason I like floor stats as a defensive metric, because defense is something that's very difficult to quantify in the NBA. It's a team thing. There's individual elements. It's very hard to sort of distill down an individual player's defensive value, analytically. So the reason I really like floor stats is because it accounts for everything. It accounts for everything that happens on the floor: chemistry, good passing, how good the opponents are, how bad the opponents are. One of the big problems that I have with it, and I think that most people have with it, is that you do need a pretty significant sample size in order to get any meaningful data from it. And especially with the Celtics team that experienced so much turnover, and especially this early in the season, it's going to be a while before we have anything like that. But, it's done a lot of good things, like letting us see, for example, that, the perceived value of Marcus Smart and his defense, it does have analytic roots that, sort of demonstrate the value of a player like that.
Yeah, I'll piggyback on that. I like floor stats a lot as well. Basketball is ultimately a team sport, and a player's contribution can always be caught by the box score. I think Marcus Smart is a good test case of that. And like Sam Sheehan said, these stats are noisy, even year to year. And on top of that, if we're talking about metrics like real plus minus or something like that, which attempts to account for the quality of a player's team, the quality of the opponent, you still have problems with sample size because, Steph Curry plays all his minutes alongside Klay Thompson. How do you apportion credit on the offensive and defensive end? It's a real issue. So, I don't think that you want to take these stats necessarily as gospel. There's definitely a lot of room to maneuver. So, but, I do think that they are useful if you use them the right way and just kind of understand that they are a little bit noisy.
I mean, guys, so one of the things which I think came up a lot the last few years for Celtics fans and NBA observers in general is that Avery Bradley was seen sort of universally as one of the great perimeter defenders. But I don't know if there was very much numbers-wise that backed that up. So if you listen to almost any NBA great perimeter player, like Steph Curry as an example, maybe the best of them all, they pretty much to a man said Avery Bradley was the toughest cover they had. Like, no one covered as well as Avery. But I don't know if the numbers really necessarily back that up. So how do we account for that? Or how do we figure that plays into it? Like, what do we do with that?
So this is kind of an interesting area for me, because I'm a big proponent of, you trust the players more than pretty much anyone else, where they're going to know best. And yeah, like they said, the players were always saying things like Kyrie Irving should have been an all-star, and other things like, Avery Bradley being the toughest cover. However, I think analytically, when you get back to some of these things, I think it also sort of demonstrates what the value of one-on-one defense is, particularly on the perimeter, and how much more important things like being being a strong defensive player in the team aspect, being able to switch, being able to fight over screens the way Marcus Smart does, being able to box out someone who might be bigger and like kind of stronger than you. Particularly in Avery Bradley's case, he was kind of in a tough spot because while he's an excellent defender, he had to play a lot of shooting guard, whereas really he's got, pretty average point guard size. And especially when you put him next to Isaiah Thomas, as he played, a lot of his last years in Boston, you end up, taking guys much bigger than you. And when you're in switches, there's just not a lot of size there. And I think that switchability really hurts in those things. And also, I just think that perimeter defense, the guys shoot well at the hole. As you get in close, that's the old Houston Rockets model. And I just think that big defense is much, much, much more important than, guard and, to a certain extent, wing defense.
Why do you think that, though? Why would it be more important to have like a Rudy Gobert, say, than an Avery Bradley? All right, I got a question for you guys around defense, and it sort of plays into some of this stuff. So the NBA is really moving towards this constant switching all the time type thing. And a lot of players are being drafted and groomed and signed to these huge deals as a result of that, right? A guy who they think maybe can fit into that kind of a system. And some other players, Jahlil Okafor is a great example of a guy who seems to be a dinosaur in all ways, both offensively and probably defensively as well. Although I still want him on the Celtics, damn it. So do you think this kind of a thing, though, is a fad? Because if it is, then maybe individual defense does matter or will matter again in the near future, much more so than the sort of team aspect of it. Matt, what do you think?
Well, I just wish we had more data to sort of at least have maybe teams have this data. I don't know. But, NBA.com certainly doesn't. Like, what sort of defensive schemes generally produce the best results? We just don't have the data for that right now. So I wish we had a definitive answer to it, but we just don't. Same thing with like the Avery Bradley problem, and you could apply it to like Klay Thompson and Gary Harris, whose reputation exceeds what the advanced numbers are saying. We just don't really know. There's just certain gaps in our knowledge at this point. I'd love to investigate that at some point, but right now we just don't know.
So I think that individually, to sort of answer your question, and sort of tie everything back, I think that what is most important to defense is knowing where your weaknesses are as a team and hiding those to the best of your ability. And I think that, with team defense, you can always do that, but strong individual defense will help cover up those weaknesses, if that makes sense.
I mean, one thing that makes sense to me for sure is the lack of fashion weakness whenever you're wearing greats, which are, of course, great sneakers, Brooklyn's first sneaker company. They sell all the greats, classic styles, made the best, for less. You can see this thing right here, right? It's pretty sweet, right? It's all white. You can get all sorts of colors, though. They got a wide selection of men's and women's shoes, versatile styles, suitable for any occasion. Their best sellers include this guy right here, the all-leather Royale lace-up. That's a Royale. And the Worcester slip-on. I got to tell you, man, I walk around, I feel pretty special in these things. I feel like everyone's checking me out, not the other way around, if you feel me. So you can check these out with lots of other styles at greats.com. We've got a special deal for you guys. Save 15% on your first order with our offer code Celtics Roundtable. Should be pretty easy to remember, right? Go to greats.com. That's GREATS.com. And be sure to enter Celtics Roundtable to save 15% at checkout. They also believe so much in their shoes, they offer a no-risk return and exchange policy to guarantee that you get the right fit in a style you love. That's greats.com, and use our code Celtics Roundtable to save 15%. All right, let's come back now to talking about defense, and let's bring it more directly back to the Celtics now. So, guys, based on what we know from the analytics and the numbers, I know we got a lot of new players, but that's okay. Who do the numbers like? Who do the numbers say are the best defensive players on the Celtics, and what should we be looking for as the season begins?
Yeah, we all know Marcus Smart. He's always rated well analytically, defensively. Terry Rozier did pretty well, at least for his position last year, according to the numbers. Aaron Baines, of course. The Celtics lost Amir Johnson, who did great analytically, both on offense and defense, but especially defense. Aaron Baines was pretty close to that number. We saw against Philly in that first game just how effective he was at denying shots around the rim. I think Hayward ranks as a positive. I think Horford's just about like around the middle in terms of centers, maybe power forwards as well. He's quick on his feet, but he's, I think, like 25th percentile or something in rebound percentage. So, that is finishing up the play, and that's important. So, maybe he finishes up at around average there. Even though the Celtics did lose Jay Crowder and Avery Bradley, they did acquire some pretty solid defenders in addition to them, and they did get a little bit bigger in their backcourt, going from Avery Bradley to Jaylen Brown and Isaiah Thomas to Kyrie Irving. So, I do think that there is reason to expect that the Celtics, who unexpectedly slipped last year, to even get a little bit better despite losing two of the best perimeter defenders in the NBA.
Sam, so Marcus Smart, there's a lot of talk about him specifically, maybe getting a contract extension in the next few days or week or so. And so, watching Marcus Smart play is very exciting. Lord knows the man cannot shoot to save his life. Hopefully it's getting better, but we say that every year. If he's not a truly elite defender, he's probably not worth the money that he's going to end up getting. By my eye test, he is indeed that elite guy. I mean, he seems to be able to cover anyone from point guards like Kyrie Irving all the way up to Paul Millsap, and sometimes even a guy like Porzingis. So he can cover anybody one-on-one, or so it seems. Do the numbers back that up, and is he really worth the extension, at least from a defensive point of view?
I mean, I'm an unapologetic Marcus Smart stan, but the answer, at least from my perspective, is yes, absolutely yes. Marcus Smart is I don't think that it's possible to dream up a better defender of Marcus Smart's size. He's strong for this switch-heavy NBA. You can put him into very small lineups. I mean, he is a point guard. You know what I'm saying? And we've seen him play point guard. And we've seen, the passing and the reads and, just the stuff that he can generate out there. So if you can have a guy like that hold up in switch-heavy lineups, guarding wings like small forwards, shooting guards, and even power forwards, you end up seeing a guy who's got a lot of surplus value in this league. He's also, very good at not being screened, which is a tremendously underrated defensive stat. Watch Marcus Smart on any play where he is guarding the ball handler and watch him evade a screen, and you'll see what I'm talking about. That's very important to not giving up at the point of attack and really eating up shot clock if you can get an opponent to whiff on a screen multiple times. And on top of all of that, what I think we're seeing in common with a lot of these guys that Matt just lifted off, like Terry Rozier, some of these other guys, is they're all excellent rebounders, and that's a huge weakness of the Celtics last year, given that they had a lot of height and given that they played small, and I think that they're going to try to play small again. But rebounding is an underrated part of defense, particularly contested rebounding. That's the big difference. I think everyone's saying the Celtics are going to be terrible rebounding because they lost Avery Bradley, who got 8 rebounds a game. But then when you look at the contested rebounding percentage, which is some of these sports view stats that you can look up that show how well a guy rebounded when there was another guy, I think, within 2 or 3 feet of him. You see these guys like Terry Rozier, Marcus Smart, Jaylen Brown all rise to the top of these elite rebounding ranks. And I think that's kind of why we saw Amir Johnson get such a benefit of the doubt from the real plus minus and some of this other stuff, because he was one of the I think he was the 3rd best contested rebounder in the NBA. And for a team that's hurting for rebounds, that's very important to end possessions. If you make a team, you can make a team miss, but if you don't get the rebound, it doesn't matter. So I think that, they're still going to have the same problems with the bigs. If Al Horford goes down, they're going to really need one of those bigs to be able to rebound, whether that's, Tice, Yabusele, or Aaron Baines. But I just think that Marcus Smart is a perfect defender for the NBA, going forward, especially, being able to hide stars like the Celtics are going to need to now that they have, guys like Kyrie Irving and Gordon Hayward on the roster.
Wow, we got to hide Gordon Hayward. I didn't realize it was that bad.
He's a good defender, or at least the numbers say so.
He's a fine defender. He's like he had Rudy Gobert backing him. I'm just saying, like Rudy Gobert was backing him up in Utah. Like he does a good job staying ahead of the guy. Well, let's just see once he gets literally one of the best rim protecting big men out from behind him. I love Al. Al blocks shots, but it's let's wait and see. I wouldn't get ahead of ourselves.
I want to know what the host thinks. I want to know
with Daniel Tice. Daniel Tice is going to make it impossible to know.
Levy, what do you think about the Celtics this year defensively?
What do I think about them defensively? I expect them to be very good this year, actually. I think Aaron Baines and Daniel Tice are probably going to get a fair amount of playing time. I'm not sure who the fifth starter is yet. I'm not convinced it's Marcus Morris yet. And I'm not convinced it's Marcus Smart yet. It might just end up being Aaron Baines when all is said and done. And he might be getting that 20 to 25 minutes of time. If Tice keeps playing the way he's playing, he's going to get time too. And that's exciting stuff, man. Feels like we found this gem. Of course, I've been saying that about Jordan Mickey forever. So I don't know, man. I believe, though. I always believe in the young big guy who's sitting on the bench. This year it's Daniel Tice. He looks amazing, though, doesn't he? So I want to believe in that guy, too. I think the Celtics are going to be improved defensively from last year. Although Kyrie is not a good defensive point guard, as we've said many times in many of these shows before, we think he has the ability to be at least okay, unlike Isaiah, who really just had a ceiling on that. And he was not as bad as Isaiah even now. I hope so.
Brad Stevens wants to switch. We know that. We know that he thinks that's the best way to defend a pick and roll. He's said as much. Kyrie Irving is definitely more switchable, at least, than Isaiah. But, the Celtics hive of 6'7" to 6'9" guys who could defend three position. They're 5 deep at that spot. So, and I'm including Marcus Smart in there too. So, I think there is room for optimism.
Yeah, and let's not forget what J.J. Redick said about Jaylen Brown last year. He said he was the best guy at defending him, and that's that is not Jaylen Brown's a strong guy, but when you're guarding J.J. Redick, you're running around screens, chasing guys through back screens, trying to stay on a guy. So if you can guard a guy like that and be as strong as Jaylen Brown is, I'm really excited to see what Jaylen Brown does this year. Personally, I think that he could kind of be the key that unlocks everything, because he could just be that perfect fit next to the Celtics kind of 3 stars and whoever else they want to put out there.
I like that the Celtics are bigger this year. When I was watching the playoffs this year, I don't think it was the most impressive showing for the Celtics, particularly on the defensive end. Yeah, it's some of those lineups out there were pretty pitiful, and I think Danny Ainge may have mentioned this when he traded Avery Bradley, but the Celtics were just ultimately too small, I feel like, and I like the fact that I think they're just going to be a little bit bigger out there defensively without sacrificing any offensive versatility. Anyway.
That is going to do it for this edition of the Celtics Roundtable, Analytics edition, I might add. Thanks for watching and listening. If you enjoyed it, hit the like button and subscribe. If you're listening to us, check us out and subscribe on your favorite podcast app, or, of course, the Boston Celtics news feed there. You can follow us on Twitter at CLNS Roundtable. And you know what? I want to thank Sam Sheehan. I want to thank Matt Ignal. Until next time, guys, I'm Jonathan Levy. We'll see you then.